Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our Innovation Lab webinar. And we're really excited here at ECICOG, East Central Iowa Council of Governments, to be hosting our event today. And some of you may be from outside of our region. ECICOG actually serves Lynn, Johnson, Jones, Iowa, Benton, and Washington counties. If you are outside of our particular region, there are COGs that work throughout the state of Iowa, and we are happy to connect you with the appropriate organization for your part of the state. And so with that, I want to introduce our two panelists today. We have Jordan Degree, who is with us from IdeaBright, formerly known as the Rural Ideas Network. And he's really going to be talking to us about this exciting program that they've been doing throughout a handful of, locations throughout the state of Iowa, the Innovation Labs. And then we also have with us Derek Lumsden, who is the Executive Director of Jones County Economic Development. And Monticello, Iowa is home to one of the latest Innovation Lab locations. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Jordan. But I guess I should mention that for the folks that are watching, as you have questions, please put those into the chat box. We have a brief presentation, but we definitely want to hear your questions and throw those out to our panelists. So please use that chat function. All right, Jordan.
All right, thanks, Karen. So as Karen mentioned, my name is Jordan Degree. I am Executive Director of a nonprofit organization called IdeaBright. And we exist to design, test, and replicate great ideas to help communities and individuals thrive. We run a variety of different initiatives, both in the state of Iowa and beyond. One of those initiatives is the Rural Ideas Network. And the Rural Ideas Network is really a tool that we use to share information about what we're doing in some of our other initiatives that's working. And specifically what we're doing in rural communities, smaller communities, to help support rural entrepreneurs. And so one of the things that we are doing, and I'm going to share my screen a little bit as I talk here, just I feel it's better to give people visuals and help you understand kind of the nuts and bolts of what we're doing. But one of the things we're doing is at the onset, actually a little bit before the onset of the pandemic, in late 2018, we had launched a co-working space in Dubuque, Iowa, which is where we are based, which I understand is not a rural community. But we had launched a co-working space in Dubuque, Iowa. And that co-working space was kind of a co-working space and an innovation and entrepreneurship hub. We did not just offer co-working space or plans to startups, remote workers, and existing businesses, but we also offered business coaching, business support services. We hosted other resource providers in the space who had valuable things to share with local entrepreneurs, startups, existing business owners. And then we also have a series of innovation services that we provide to existing business partners. We've worked with companies like John Deere and Mercy One and Alliant Energy to help them really capture and unleash the innovation potential of their employees to create actionable solutions and solve pressing challenges. So we had launched that in late 2018, and we had always kind of felt that there was an opportunity to replicate the successes that we were experiencing. And we were actually invited by our area COG, East Central Intergovernmental Association, to share at an economic development seminar that they were putting on called Prosperity Eastern Iowa, about our model. And so we shared about the Innovation Lab, the initial Innovation Lab at that. And afterward, we were approached by some rural economic development directors from throughout Eastern Iowa who said, that sounds really great. Would it work in a community of 2,000? And we didn't know. And we said that. We said, well, we don't know, but we'd be happy to explore whether there's opportunity there with you. And so working with a handful of rural economic development directors, basically what we did was we evaluated our model. We looked at what's working because it's in a big community and what could still work even in a small community. And so obviously co-working space is reliant on having a large number of coworkers to kind of foot the bill. But what we realized is that by combining the model of a co-working space with our business support services and with innovation services, we could actually create a model that would work in a rural community without a large population, didn't rely on having a huge number of co-workers using the space, and could be pretty much financially self-sufficient. And so we took that idea and we shopped it around, and we were lucky enough to have Iowa Economic Development Authority and Debbie Durham say, that sounds like a great idea. We'd love to invest to pilot that idea in some rural communities. And then we were able to pair that financial contribution with a community partner that we had, Dubuque Community Credit Union, who said, yeah, we think that this has potential to really help businesses in rural communities as well. So we had 2 initial investors who basically allowed us to pilot this model in right now 4 rural communities in eastern Iowa. Those communities are Cascade, Iowa, which has a population of about 2,000 people. Independence, Iowa, which is just over 4,000 people. Dyersville, Iowa, which is about 5,000 people. And Monticello, Iowa, which is why Derek's here. That's our most recent opening facility that's opened, and we're excited to be there. It was also our most extensive. The other 3 communities, we kind of slotted ourselves into existing vacant retail space on the main street of that community. In Monticello, there were some private property owners that actually were interested in donating a fairly substantial building for this purpose. And so we ended up doing a pretty significant property overhaul, but now I have a permanent home in Monticello for the Innovation Lab there. All right, so let me just show you really briefly kind of an overview of what an innovation lab is and does, and then we'll let Derek talk about kind of some of the things that he's seeing it accomplish in the Monticello area in Jones County. And then we have some opportunities that we want to share with all of you in case you're interested. We actually have received some funding that will help us replicate the model in more communities across the state of Iowa. So I'm just going to briefly share my screen here. All right, so what you're seeing, this is going to be a quick little under 1.5 minute video tour of the Innovation Lab facility in Monticello. You can see this is the facility. The Innovation Lab actually occupies the right side of the building, and another one of our program initiatives that's focused on kids and families and building hands-on creativity skills through play occupies the left side of this building. But this video specifically focuses on the Innovation Lab in Monticello. So this will give you a kind of a quick walkthrough of that facility. There's no sound, so don't worry about adjusting your volume. So this is a flexible work area up front. We have bar seating. There's a large private meeting space in the back. This facility also has a kitchenette. All of our facilities have a small kitchenette. This one features 3 private offices and then open plan workspace for coworkers and community members to use as they work to launch and grow their businesses. Our facilities are occupied by existing businesses, by startups, by freelancers, by remote workers, and by companies that want to have a branch presence in some of these smaller communities. If you go to innovationlab.us, this is our website. This dives a little bit more into some of the services that our Innovation Lab model provides. But basically, what we provide is co-working plans, so space for people to work out of. We provide our Innovation Works innovation services to existing businesses. We've also applied these services to help local community governments solve challenges, to help local schools and school districts engage students and stakeholders in creating new curriculum efforts. We've done it in a variety of ways. We provide meeting space rentals and we do team building activities. And then we also host events, both led by us and by a variety of other resource providers like Iowa Venture School, Iowa SourceLink, IEDA, SBDC. A lot of different partners use our spaces to bring resources into the communities that our labs are located. This just shows you our current lab locations. These are the labs that we manage directly ourselves and some of our supporters. But one of the things that's we're excited about is that not only do we have a network of labs that we manage ourselves, but we've packaged everything we do within those labs into basically a program, a toolkit, and we're helping other communities launch their own versions of our Innovation Lab model. I just want to really briefly show you a couple of these that we've helped launch. So this one is called Lansing Office Works and Lansing Kitchen Works. They are located in Lansing, Iowa, which is a community of about 1,200 people. They occupied a vacant restaurant to create both co-working space and also an enterprise kitchen that people in their community can rent out to use to, if they have a catering business or a food truck, or if they just have a holiday cookie making family reunion that they want to do, they can rent this commercial kitchen on top of the co-working space, the innovation services, the meeting space, the team building activities that come with the model that we train them how to deliver and do for their local community. This partner, Growing Small Towns, this is a nonprofit located in Oaks, North Dakota, population 1,200 people, and in a 7-county region of about 30,000 people combined population. They added a blog and podcast on top of the basic service model. So they also do a weekly blog and podcast that is just gangbusters. They've been doing that for about 4 years. So they started with that. And then they realized that they wanted a physical space in their community that could serve as a hub for innovation and entrepreneurship. And so they connected with us. We helped them launch their space, provided an operating system so that they didn't have to figure out every little detail about how do we run a co-working space? How do people sign up for plans? How do we provide innovation services? That all comes with the model itself. All right, so I'm going to stop talking about the model. That's just kind of a 10,000-foot overview of what it is that we're doing. I'm going to kick it over to Derek so he can talk about kind of some of the impacts that he's seeing in Jones County and the Monticello area now that they have an innovation lab in their community. So we'll stop sharing. There we go.
All right, thanks, Jordan. So one of the reasons that we decided that we wanted one of these is because we have a lot of people that commute out. And a lot of those jobs don't require people to move out anymore, go out or commute out to their different jobs and facilities. And the pandemic especially brought that home, but this is something we were discussing with Jordan and his team prior to the pandemic. We actually had a major manufacturer go out. And this is the time when Jordan was talking about how they worked a lot with John Deere and some major employers in their region. So we actually got together with the owner of the empty building and a couple local philanthropists and Jordan and his team and my team in the city of Monticello and said, can we do something that encourages maybe a manufacturing incubator in addition to some of the services that Jordan and his team provided? Well, that stirred up a lot of good conversation. That didn't ultimately happen. But one of the people at that conversation owned a property in Monticello that they didn't know what to do with. It was an old Dollar General building in our downtown. Dollar General moved out. They didn't have any plans for it. They were using it for storage. So it was a conversation that they had with myself and the city administrator. If we donate this to the city, can you guarantee that this building can be donated to Jordan and his team to do an innovation lab? And so that was something the city looked at. We brought in Jordan and his team because, as he said, it's a much bigger building than they're used to having. And it was a conversation that, you know what, we could do both. We could do this in this building, but then the other side is the kid side, the Creative Adventure Lab, which was really another key piece that the city of Monticello wanted to see in there, a way to develop that sort of STEM interest for young kids too, to develop into future entrepreneurs in our community. So working with Jordan, the city of Monticello, and my office, we did a rural revitalization grant through Liesl Siebert IEDA to do some basic facade work. Jordan and his team got with IEDA and some other grant funding options to do some of the interior work. And before they were even done, they had people willing to be in the offices and renting out space. So right now we have a lawyer and a real estate person that are in the offices and who normally don't work in town, but they're in the office a couple of days a week because they have that freedom. They don't have to rent from someone else. They don't have to go into an office. They can go into this space, work with other people, be around other people, have some of those ideas that they share and talk about and learn about the community that way. Plus they have other people in there as well. We have a gentleman that was part of our Hometown Pride community efforts that decided he wanted to be part of that. He rented space in the Innovation Lab to help keep some of that momentum alive, work on developing website and tourism aspects for Monticello that weren't being done to the level he thought they should be, as well as a couple other businesses. Plus, you notice Jordan said that there were team building activities and meeting events and stuff. And the Innovation Lab actually became the hub for our Monticello Main Street program, where they met every week for months to try to develop into the program that is now one of the newly christened Main Street programs in the state of Iowa. And they will continue to be housed out of that office, which brings in a ton of people and a ton of ideas to that space to really fill out some of the stuff that Jordan talks about. We've only been open, I think, a few months now. I think we've been open since April. So we haven't seen some of that spill over to the rest of the community, but we've had a lot of public meetings there. We've had a lot of events there that showcase that space. In addition to opening the Creative Adventure Lab last month that they did, that brought in a lot of people that hadn't been through it yet. They got to see both sides. So I think as this starts to ramp up and once the Main Street office gets running, they'll sort of play that local facilitator role for Jordan and his team as the key guard, the guard of that facility. They're going to play that role and try to develop it more. And as the Rural Ideas Network develops, we're going to see a lot more of that creative entrepreneurship, bringing those people in, trying to figure out how can we utilize this to its full potential, not only now, but as we plan different events in our community. One of the things that we're talking about that we started this fall is working with Kirkwood Community College on a new computer science program. And this is to get computer science grads through the process faster and into the workforce. And we're partnering with Night Moves program out of Jefferson, Iowa. And this is something that's great because if they go through this Night Moves program, which is a 2-year program through Kirkwood and the Night Moves program, they are offered jobs through tech facilities anywhere in the world with the requirement that they have to be able to live wherever they want. So we're hoping we can keep some of those graduates in Jones County. And then we have this built-in space at the Innovation Lab to bring them in, where the entire idea behind the Night Moves program is computer science, innovation, and collaboration. And now that can spill over to everyone else in that space as well to bring even more ideas and creativity to the table. So this was really the launch pad for how we got there. And working with Jordan and his team has been great because they sort of set up the basic overall structure. Here's what you need to fall under. Here's sort of the parameters of this program of how we see it. And then we can plug in our own unique situations and needs into that and develop from there. So for the city of Monticello, it's been fantastic already. We're expecting over the next 3 to 5 years, continual growth in that space with the hope that Jordan has to think about building a second story.
So Monticello was in the fortunate situation where there was a fairly large vacant space that had formerly been a Dollar General that was donated. But that isn't really necessary to have that either that size of space or to have a space that's donated, if I understand some of the other communities correctly. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Jordan?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, in most communities, and this model was specifically designed, if we took the same ratio of population to the number of coworkers that we have in Dubuque and applied that across some of these other communities, in Cascade, we'd expect to have 0.27 coworkers. Well, that's not really how people work. But we always knew from day one that having a lot of space for co-working wasn't necessarily the most valuable aspect of this model. It's an important part of the model. And having that physical space does create a infrastructure within a community where people know that they can go to find resources to help them become better entrepreneurs, where they can find innovative people and ideas happening, where they can find like-minded peers, and even where a community can point to and say, look, we're investing and we have a belief that innovation is a viable path forward as part of our economic development strategy. But in most of our communities, because you're not going to have 10, 15, 20 coworkers, you might have 2, 3, 4, 5 coworkers. The space doesn't really need to be that large. We recommend that a community identify a space between 1,500 and 2,500 square feet in size. And that's really, if you look down your main street, there's probably 1, 2, or 3 spaces that would meet that. criteria. Even better if it has kind of a large open area in the front and then maybe a room that can be used as a meeting area in the back. That's kind of a sweet spot of an existing design. When we go into a community, you know, if you're taking an existing facility and you're just going to adapt it to this use, which is what we recommend, because then you're also filling a vacant space in your community. We anticipate, you know, that you can get one of these up and running with a startup budget of $75,000 or less. And that includes, you know, some cosmetic improvements to the space, signage, furnishings, all the tech and networking infrastructure that you need within that space for people to be able to work and meet comfortably there. And, you know, this model is interesting because it's doing a couple things in the communities that we're in already. And we launched our first rural model in early part of 2021. So we have about a year and a half of data so far showing that these models are really producing the results that we thought that they would. You know, number one, you have a physical space that a community can point to when someone says, where can I find entrepreneurs in your community? Well, you can find them here at the Innovation Lab or whatever the facility is called in your community. They don't all have to be called Innovation Labs. That's just what we chose to call ours. And then once your community can answer that question with confidence, it's amazing how many other resource providers and partners will want to show up in your community and help those entrepreneurs, whether they're launching a new business or they own an existing business and they're trying to grow it. We have partners like Empower Her Company out of Cedar Rapids that provides female entrepreneurship-led peer learning and educational workshops on a monthly basis in a variety of our spaces. We've partnered with Iowa Venture School to do business accelerator programs out of these spaces. We're partnering with SBDC to offer one-on-one in-person business counseling out of these spaces. We deliver virtual one-on-one business counseling through these spaces as well to any coworker using these spaces. So the number of partners who kind of layer on top of the baseline of programming that occurs within these spaces continues to expand. And we firmly believe, and we developed the model this way on purpose, if you're an entrepreneur, you need as much support as you can get, and that support is going to help you achieve your business goals faster and more efficiently than you could on your own. Not to say that you can't be successful on your own, you absolutely can. But why wouldn't you want help and support to get there faster and at less cost than you could on your own? And so that's how we design the model. And that's why it really acts as, we call it a platform, because it has built-in programs and services that absolutely create positive impact for individuals and for communities at large. But it also plays nicely with all these other partners who can land on that platform and provide programs and services. Derek mentioned Night Moves. That's a great example. Iowa Venture School, as I mentioned, Empower Her Company, as I mentioned, SBDC, Technology Association of Iowa has done workshops and seminars. It's amazing how many people want to serve entrepreneurs, but if your community can't answer the basic question, where can I find entrepreneurs in your community? It's a risk for them to try and show up in your community, invest the time and resources that it takes to land programs there and market those programs. So we help with all that for those partners in order to create a richer, more robust entrepreneurial ecosystem in these rural communities and really throughout the regions surrounding these communities.
So if I have found my space and I have a willing building owner who wants to work and we're able to find the funding to kind of help make some of those initial improvements. What about ongoing costs related to these spaces? You know, how does that get taken care of, and even maybe more routine things like cleaning and scheduling and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Karen. You know, first of all, through what we call the Rural Coworking Accelerator, that's our program that we've set up to help other communities launch these spaces and then successfully operate these spaces. Through the Rural Coworking Accelerator, you don't even have to have a building identified yet. You don't even have to have the startup funding identified. You can start working with us and we'll provide tools, resources, and advice as you think about where should this be located in our community? Which building is going to be the best fit? Which one's going to be the least expensive to accommodate these programs, or which one's going to have the most impact on the overall sense of innovation and entrepreneurship in our community. We help you identify funding sources. We can help you understand where other partners have secured their funding from, because a lot of times, like USDA, for example, their community facilities program, we tapped into that to help fund the furnishings and equipment in our Monticello facility. They've expressed to us that they love the model and want to help other communities replicate that through that grant programming. So we can help communities identify, where does this best get cited in your community? How do you fund the startup costs? How can you engage local supporters and sponsors? How can you engage different grant funding? We train you on how to run the space. We actually configure and deploy all of the systems that you need to run the space. You saw the Growing Small Towns website. You saw the Lansing Office Works website. You saw our Innovation Lab website. They all have a similar look and feel because we actually created that for those partners and then trained them on how to run that site, how to run the communications aspect of it, how to do the online billing, the automated billing for your coworkers, how to help people reserve meeting space online, automated. So that really all it takes, and what we're finding is that this is playing out not only in the spaces that we run, but also in our partner spaces, about a quarter time position to actually manage and run the spaces themselves and manage that community of people using the space. And in a lot of our spaces, that's not even necessarily a staff person. That is someone who was already interested in using the space, who runs their own business, who we said, hey, if we can give you a free desk in this space, would you be willing to be the community manager, is what we call them? Would you be willing to be the community manager? And 4 out of the 5 times we've had people say, yeah, absolutely. And so they actually give the tours of the space to interested coworkers. They restock the toilet paper and the paper towels and the coffee. They do light vacuuming once or twice a week and make sure that the space is in good shape. They're the ones responding to needs or questions from the users themselves directly. So what we find is that the staffing to have a successful space is pretty minimal. We don't have a full-time receptionist or anything that's there when you walk in the door. We use a remote-based keyless access system. These spaces are 100% secure. We help partners set up security systems that make sure that their space is protected and that the people using their space is protected, but that they can also provide access on the fly. If someone calls them and says, hey, I'd love to get in the space for a meeting this afternoon, they can say, sure, let me give you access that you can share with your meeting space users. So all those systems and processes are all set up. We anticipate that these spaces will actually pay rent to a landlord. We don't anticipate landlords donating buildings or donating space. We don't think that's realistic. And ultimately it's can be somewhat counterproductive to successful economic development to not pay your own way and help a landlord support the continued maintenance of a building in your downtown. So we anticipate that these spaces pay rent, they pay for their own utilities, they pay a staff member or make a deal with someone who wants to use the space. But basically we look at our budget template for these is an annual operating budget of about $30,000. And through earned revenue from programming and sponsorship opportunities within the space itself, we anticipate that by the end of year 3, we kind of have a 3-year ramp up period, that by year 3, these spaces are positive cash flowing, that they have the potential to positive cash flow $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 on top of and over their expenses, so that for a host organization, whether that's an individual or an economic development group or a local nonprofit or a community government, that this is actually something that's adding back into the kitty versus an economic development effort that's just constantly costing money in the hopes that it's going to create other economic development outcomes. This one itself is going to create positive economic and financial security for the host organization. And that's, by the way, that's playing out as true in not only the spaces we manage, but also the 2 partner spaces that we've helped launch. It's not a huge sample size, but 100% is a pretty good record versus, 50% or 0%.
And I would say, I'm going to add on there for the sponsorship opportunities as well. That's one area where obviously Jones County Economic Development isn't playing that community manager role, but we do a lot of when people are like, where can we host a meeting? Have you thought about the Innovation Lab? We talked to a number of places that were interested in being involved somehow, but they didn't know how. We sent out the sponsorship information and said, this is a way that you can help entrepreneurs and help us get the next generation of workforce and entrepreneurs out there. So that was a way for us to get in front of people that maybe we hadn't had as much success with too. So the economic development impacts can really be spread a lot further than just the entrepreneurs in that center, but can help everybody across the board.
Yeah, and sponsorships, sponsorships are not always the easiest thing to get, but remember, once you can answer the question, where can I find entrepreneurs in your community? There's a lot of people that want to show up. If you think about all of the professional services that a new business or a growing business would need, financial services, insurance services, accounting services, legal services, that's a lot of potential built-in sponsors who get real value, tangible value from having their brand, their logo, their identity in front of new and growing businesses on a daily basis. So finding sponsors for these spaces is not a very hard task in most communities we've found.
And for those that are joining us today, please feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat box, and we're happy to get to those. But Jordan, you mentioned that one of the services that IdeaBright provides is the business coaching, virtual business coaching. And I guess, and I don't know, Derek, I'm curious if anyone's used that aspect of the service in Monticello yet, but if you could just talk a little bit about some of the stories of how Innovation Lab participants have used that.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to step just a quick step back about the business coaching services that we offer. We offer those at no additional cost to anyone who has a co-working plan in either an innovation lab that we run or one of the partner labs that we've helped community partners launch. But we also offer that service as a standalone service. And we contract with economic development partners who want to offer more robust supports for their local entrepreneurs, but maybe don't have the capacity to do that themselves. So our business coaching services are offered to both people that have co-working plans, but then also to any entrepreneur through economic development partners. So as an example, we provide coaching services across 6 states in the Midwest to a variety of economic development partners. Sherburne County, Minnesota is one of those partners. Any one of the 80,000+ residents living in Sherburne County can access the Sherburne County Business Lab, which is a virtual lab where they can connect with these services. We help them set that up. It's not a physical space, it's just a service. And when they schedule a coaching session, they're actually working with one of our experienced entrepreneurs that we have on staff as coaches. And so we're providing hundreds of coaching to hundreds of businesses every year across the Midwest. We gather some baseline data about the impact that coaching is making to date. So we started our coaching services in early 2021. To date, 87% of the businesses that we coach have reported positive business growth since starting their coaching with us. We've created a net job gain of more than 55 new jobs in the communities where we're providing coaching. That's directly attributable to our coaching. So we ask participants every session, have you added or lost any jobs at your business? And so if they say, well, we lost a job this week, we put a -1 in. If they added a job, we put a +1. So that net gain of 55 jobs is businesses that have gained a net gain of 55 jobs since they started their coaching with us. So we provide those services and we help a variety of different types of businesses. We've helped, it's actually pretty interesting to see kind of the spread of different types of business industries that access our coaching services. We've helped agricultural companies, we've helped retail companies, we've helped lifestyle businesses, tech companies, service providers, professional services, human services, education services. One of the programs that we helped was a yoga in the schools program. And they basically provided yoga classes. They contracted with schools and provided yoga classes in the classrooms. So they did yoga in partnership with teachers. Their business was doing pretty well. They had, I think, 32 schools that they were providing yoga services within. And then COVID hit and all the schools closed and they didn't know what the heck they were going to do. And they thought they were going to have to basically close. They had, I think, 12 employees that they were thinking that they were going to have to lay off and they were just going to have to close shop. They started coaching with us. We helped them look at their business model and the value that it created. We helped them look at some different distribution channels that they could maybe leverage. They actually ended up launching an entire new online-based program and service. And so now after 2 years of coaching them, they now have 50 employees and they're in over 200 schools across the state of Iowa through an online, virtual-based service mixed in with their in-person services. So that's just one example of helping kind of a unique business look at what they were doing in some new ways. And because we're able to provide that kind of entrepreneurial perspective, we can help businesses ask better questions. And we find that when they ask better questions, they develop better answers and that really lead to business growth. Another company we helped, they're called Clean Chickens and Company, and they do just that. They developed a proprietary mobile poultry processing trailer that they can bring to an organic farm. And basically, instead of the farmer having to cart their chickens off to a poultry processing plant, they bring the plant to those farms and they clean and package the chickens. It seems like a simple concept, but they're based in Minnesota. They actually got connected to us through one of our partners, Greater Fergus Falls Economic Development Commission contracts with us. And when we started working with them, they were limited to only doing organic farms because they didn't have any USDA or people that were taking their produce to farmers markets, not wholesaling through grocery stores because they didn't have USDA approval. We helped them work through that process, think about the value and the cost of USDA approval. They ended up ultimately pursuing it. And now they went from cleaning 250 chickens their first year. And they now clean over 20,000 chickens a year. They're actually looking at franchising their trailer, their proprietary trailer technology, and franchising across different states because they're in an environment where they're seeing poultry processing plants closing, your traditional brick and mortar plant closing, and producers are having to haul their produce, their poultry, sometimes hundreds and hundreds of miles to get to the nearest plant that is usually overbooked. So having a at your doorstep solution, people are finding that producers are seeing that as a huge value add for them. So, yoga in the schools to mobile poultry processing, super different, but we take the same approach and we help create value in the same way through our experienced entrepreneurial coaching services.
And Derek, what's generally been the feedback that you've heard in terms of the folks that are using the Innovation Lab in Monticello, and has anybody taken advantage of the business coaching yet?
In Monticello, I don't know if anybody's taken advantage of the business coaching. That's something that tends to go directly to Jordan and his team. But so far, everybody that's been involved in or part of the Innovation Lab in some form or fashion thinks it's a great addition to the downtown, because it helps obviously bring back a dilapidated building that was sitting empty. It adds in a lot of different context and unique stuff to the downtown, which is something we've been saying we need in different assessments and stuff that have come up over the last several years. So that's a nice value add to our community, especially. One of the things that's really great about the business coaching and everything too, is that, and Jordan, maybe you mentioned it, maybe I didn't hear it, but that they will train people to go out and do their training for other people. So it's not always just Jordan and his team, but they can train other people as well. And I have had some questions about that because they've heard about it when Jordan presents and whatnot. So they can sort of be those ambassadors of this type of program and help entrepreneurs. We do that a lot through our organization, but we don't have the same breadth of knowledge, say, through the economic development organization, where Jordan's skills are transferable. So they send them to the people, and then those people can help, whether it's the yoga in the schools or the mobile produce, or mobile poultry type of entrepreneur. We can spread those people out and help. So we really get a lot more coverage of the different people that need help and may not know where to go, but they might know somebody and ask that question. So then we can spread that knowledge further, and that helps spread the ideas that Jordan and his team want to see. So that's something that, while we're just sort of getting kicked off here in Monticello, that we see a definite path forward in the next 3 to 5 years, as well as we're going to have some of these local training experts that can sort of do some of that role. Because as Jordan and his team get busier across the state of Iowa and maybe the country, they're not going to have time to do all of that themselves. So having some of those proteges come in and do it's going to be huge for our region.
And so, Derek, as somebody who's kind of gone through this process, what would you say were some of the lessons learned, or any advice you would extend to someone who might be listening and thinking about this program for their community?
I was involved in two. So I was also involved in the Cascade one to a degree. I would say that two things we learned in both communities is, when you're talking to your partners, let them know that this is a long-term solution to some of the problems we're facing. And Jordan can talk about it more, but one of the things was we were trying to get local banks involved. And as he mentioned, Dubuque was heavily involved, and that was sort of well, we can't have that direct competition. But it was one of the things that we said, this organization, Dubuque and the Rural Innovation Network, wants to do things. They want to be long-term partners in our community. If you want to be part of that, great. If you don't, then get out of the way. So just having those upfront conversations that this is a package deal, this is how this is going to work and move forward, that if you want to be part of it, great, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. The other part of it was probably, and this is probably unique to us, and maybe Jordan can extrapolate more, but going into the building that we did, obviously it was a lot larger than thought about. There was a lot of things we had to take care of. Cleaning out the building was something that nobody had really thought about, especially with confidential records in the basement from Dollar General's pharmacy. So how do you dispose of them? Just some of the aches and pains that come with rehabilitating an old building, especially that was just walked out of and left full of junk. But that's something we got to bring in other partners on too. We brought in our Jones County Young Professionals to help clean it out. We partnered with Parks and Rec. The city did a lot of work. And so it was a great opportunity to bring in partners that maybe don't think about working together on something like this and spreading that message further. So just think about everybody in your community as a potential partner and how they can help. And that can make the process go a lot easier. The third lesson, which is not something you can really help, don't do it during a pandemic. When supplies are hard to get and people aren't for sure if they want to be next to other people and doing things. But that one's probably a little harder to plan in advance on.
You'll be well positioned for the next pandemic, though.
I hope so.
That's right. And just to add to that, Dubuque was a partner in our pilot project. We don't ever dictate which partners show up in our community partnerships. So any community that's going through the Rural Co-working Accelerator, we can help them think about who might be a good potential partner. But there's never a forced partner for communities that are managing these spaces and programming on their own. We had been fortunate enough to enlist some financial support from Dubuque to help launch the pilot programs, the spaces that we directly managed. And so that was a unique situation to that but I do think that when you're thinking about this in your community, it is good to have an open table versus a closed table. So inviting all of the potential partners in your community to participate in learning about the concept together, seeing opportunities for how they can participate together. We can give examples of how financial institutions or law firms or other types of sponsors have supported in other communities as a way to help provide motivation and inspiration for those local partners. And so, you're better when you clasp hands and walk together. And that's the approach that we encourage our partners who want to launch these types of spaces, want to have these types of programs in their community. That's the approach that we advocate for, is, working together is much better than working in solitude. And then, just in terms of how long it takes to develop a facility, there is a lot of variation in that. Derek might remember Cascade was basically a vacant space that we didn't have to do a whole lot of build out to. We painted, we added some new lighting and some routers and modems, basically moved in our furniture, and that space I think was up and running in like 3 months. Monticello was a complete overhaul. We invested more than $400,000 into basically gutting and refurbing that building, new roof, new HVAC, new electrical, new plumbing, new bathrooms, everything. That one took 1.5 years. We ran into some supply chain issues. We ran into labor workforce issues. As we help you think about what facility might work in your facility, we can help you start to identify what some of those challenges might be, because we've done kind of the whole spectrum, a complete refurb on a vacant, abandoned building full of weird stuff in the basement, like Derek said, to a vacant space that's pretty much move-in ready, where you just throw some signage up and move your furnishings in. And we can help you kind of think through that process. That's what we like doing. And that's why we developed this program, was to help communities move past saying, can we make this happen? Or is this a solution that would work in our community? And really allowing them instead to focus on, yeah, it's proven that it can happen. We've done it. We've done it multiple times, and we have all the systems and processes to help you do it. All you need to decide is that you do want it. And then we can help you think about when it's going to actually open. And that's a totally different set of questions than, is this even possible?
And so, Jordan, you had mentioned that you recently received a grant we were involved with it here at ECICOG. And so that's opened up some special opportunities right now for communities that are considering an innovation lab. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. So we partnered with ECICOG, and basically the situation was we had some conversations with them. You, Karen, and your team were telling you about what we were doing. You guys thought it was really interesting and impactful. As those conversations continued, we decided that it made a lot of sense to try and help replicate this model even further across the state. So we were fortunate enough to work together to apply for and receive a US EDA grant that's basically focused on helping my team grow our capacity so that we can provide more coaching, more advisory, more counseling services to more communities and more entrepreneurs across the state of Iowa. And so what that specifically translates to is that normally it costs $5,000 for a community to participate in our Rural Co-working Accelerator, where we basically help you walk through all the milestones needed to get to the grand opening of your innovation and entrepreneurship hub. And then after that, we continue to work with you through providing operational systems and support. This grant increases our capacity and allows a select number of communities in the state of Iowa to basically receive a full scholarship. So there's no $5,000 Rural Co-working Accelerator fee. Or if you're not quite ready for a physical space, it can also help fund the business lab services that I talked about. So instead of the physical space, just that entrepreneurship coaching services that we provide, usually through a contract with an economic development entity, we can provide funding support to help provide those coaching services in your community as well. Sometimes communities know right away that they want the physical hub. They're ready for it. It's been an identified need in their community, and they want to move in that direction, which is great. Some communities think that that's something they might want to do, but they're not sure if the demand is there or the value is there. So they start with the coaching services because it's a lot easier to get those up and running. We can do it in about a week, and we can provide those services to all of the entrepreneurs in your community. Some communities do both. They say, hey, we want to have a physical space that offers co-working space and coaching to anyone that has a co-working plan. But we also want to make this coaching available to any business owner or potential business owner across our entire service area, whether that's a community, a county, a membership base, whatever. So we specifically designed these programs and services so that they can meet a lot of different needs, because we understand that the needs in rural communities to support your local entrepreneurs are varied. They all, your communities all have different things that you do really well. You all have different gaps that maybe you need help filling. And our goal is to add that extra capacity, that extra bandwidth, leveraging our staff's expertise to help you fill those gaps and really continue to move your community's economic development strategies forward, with a specific focus on really harnessing innovation and entrepreneurship as a viable, proven, future-proof economic development strategy.
Thank you. And so for either of you, is there anything that you feel like we didn't cover today? We didn't have too many questions come in here, but any parting words?
I have one thought. One of the things that we find when we start working with partners, or when partners reach out to us and say, what you're doing sounds really cool, I just don't know if we're ready. And there's this kind of belief that you have to have all the pieces lined up before you can kind of start this program or start working with us. And that's not the case. In fact, part of our services act as somewhat of a feasibility study for our partners. And we help you think about, is there a good facility in your community for this program? Do you have the capacity as a community or as an organization to manage this program once it's up and running? Is there demand in your community? Will it create valuable impact? Are there potential sponsors or funders in your community or outside of your community that can help you make this happen? So one of the things that I would encourage anyone watching this to think about is that you don't have to have any of the answers figured out before you start working with us. You just have to have basically the idea that these programs and services could potentially create value in your community. And thanks to the EDA grant, it's not going to cost you anything to explore with us whether that's true. And so far, all of the communities and partners that we've worked with have found out that, yes, these programs and services will create value in our community. And they've launched their physical space, or they've continued renewing and pursuing the coaching services for multiple years of partnership with us. But I'm sure eventually we'll run into a community or a partner where we work with them, and despite everyone's best efforts, the answer is no, our community is not quite ready for this. But that helps us learn and get better too. And we can help figure out, okay, maybe not for one of the existing programs or services, but can we work with your community to develop a program or service that does create value, that does fill a gap that maybe your community is ready for? As a network, we're always trying to learn and grow and get stronger together. And the more participants we have, the more learning and growing and connecting we can do. And so that's part of the evolution of this work, is that the more people we have involved, the more people we have leveraging these proven tools and resources to create positive impact, the better, faster, stronger we're all going to get together going forward.
All right. Well, I want to extend a thank you to both Jordan and Derek for taking the time today to talk a little bit more about Innovation Labs. And again, for anyone that's interested, you can reach out directly to Jordan and his team. Jordan, you want to give the best website or way for them to do that?
Yeah, definitely. And real quickly, I did see a question come through. Is there a community size that you're targeting for the? No. We specifically developed this to work in very small communities. In fact, we're just starting to work with a partner in Stanton, Iowa, which is a community of about 600 people. And if you're an organization that serves a pocket of a larger urban community, we know that these programs and services work there too. We know that rural communities have specific challenges that programs and services that work in urban communities don't always translate to rural. But what we're finding is that the programs and services that we're creating that do specifically work in rural also work in urban settings as well. And so the answer is no. If you have a community, no matter what size, that you think that this could create value in, we're going to help you figure out whether that's true. And then if you are interested in learning more, if you go to ruralideas.net, that's the Rural Ideas Network website. You can learn more about all the programs and services we offer. We have informational brochures. And then specifically, if you're interested in participating with us under the EDA grant and having some of the initial costs of these programs and services covered for you, thanks to that grant, I would say reach out to myself, Jordan, at ruralideas.net, or reach out to Karen and her team at ECICOG, or anyone that you think could get you connected with us, but those are the two best sources. So Jordan at ruralideas.net and Karen and her team at ECICOG. And we can help you figure out if this is the right strategy for your community. And if it is, we can help figure out if the EDA grant can apply to help reduce the cost. And if it does, then we can get started working together.
And we will also be posting a recording of this webinar on our website, which is www.ecicog.org. And you can also find my contact information, as well as all the ECICOG staff there. And again, if you're not part of our region, that's just fine. We will connect you with the right folks and or to Jordan and his team. And we can also connect people with Derek if you have specific questions about his experience in Cascade or Monticello. All right. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you joining us today.
See you later.
Thanks.